Houston, we have a podcast. You're listening to the premier Rockets podcast. It's H-Town Hoops, hosted by Brandon Scott and Adam Spolane.
That is right. It is the H-Town Hoops podcast. Brandon Scott here with Adam Spolane. Austin Mendez is handling everything behind the scenes, and it has been a little over a week since we last talked to you guys. Obviously, the Rockets, as we know, lose more games than they win, so lose more often than they win. They lost over the last week since we last talked to the Brooklyn Nets, the Indiana Pacers in overtime, and the Chicago Bulls. We're recording this on Monday afternoon, right before they'll play later Monday night. They'll play and host the Boston Celtics. It's the second of a 6-game homestand. And the thing that we want to start with here, Adam, I think the big takeaway over the last week, particularly I think the last 2 games or so, you would probably say, but it's significant because of who it is just Jabari Smith having, again, back-to-back really good showings in a year where, let's be honest, and we have been throughout our time recording throughout the season, that Jabari Smith has struggled quite a bit this season, particularly with some of the things that he scouted to do well, the shooting, even some of the defense. But these last 2 games have been really good on his part. I don't know him well enough to say that I feel like it's a confidence booster. I don't know where his confidence was at in the first place. You could probably speak to that better than I can exactly. But it's got to be a good sign when you're talking about, having a 30-point double-double in one game and then backing that up with another really strong game. 20 points on 8 of 15 shooting. I mean, and I'm just noticing here from your notes is that it's his 5th. I don't even think I realized that it was his 5th straight double-digit scoring game. I didn't even realize that myself. So maybe even slowly but surely and quietly, Adam, I'm getting used to Jabari Smith shooting the ball a little bit better. What have you made of what you've seen of him of late?
Yeah, it's the first time that he's had 5 straight double-digit scoring games since November. And it does seem like this is a little bit more sustainable. And he has talked, I think, about his confidence, but also I think he just understands how to succeed, I think, a little bit better right now. And so he's sort of starting to understand where his spots are on the floor. I think he's starting to understand, how he can be successful. And then on the other hand, the team and his teammates are understanding, okay, we need to get him the ball here, and we need to focus on getting him the ball in this spot. This is what he does well. This is what he doesn't do well. And so I think that him getting more used to the NBA game and the team being more used to him, I think that it's only natural that he's going to wind up having a lot more success, and you're seeing it. And I don't think anybody thought that he was going to shoot below 40% from the field for an entire season. I don't think anybody thought that he would shoot below 30% from three-point range for an entire season. So it's all a matter of just like continuing to play hard, continuing to get better, continuing to work, and he's done that. And so you give him credit for that and not getting overly frustrated when there are plenty of reasons to get overly frustrated.
Yeah, one thing I'm trying to do, Adam, is not make too much of or draw too quick of a conclusion on what the makeup of these players exactly is when they're this young and this early on into their careers. So when we're out there watching them, Adam, and they're giving poor effort, or they look exasperated for whatever reason, or like things are discombobulated or disjointed, and again, the effort doesn't feel like it's there, I try not to judge and say, hey, well, that's just that player's character. That's just something that they, maybe you can't coach that into them. They, they're not a hard worker. I try not to draw that hard of a conclusion on it. But the other side of it is with Jabari, rarely, there have been a couple of cases where I've thought, hey, the effort's got to be a little bit better there, or that right there just isn't good enough. But by and large, it has felt like, from an approach standpoint, the makeup, everything that you would want in a number 3 overall pick is there from an approach, makeup, intangible standpoint. And then on the basketball stuff, Adam, I swear, every time I watch this guy shoot the ball, now a lot of times once it gets up in the air, it looks kind of flat and you can tell it's going to be short. But when it releases from his hand, everything looks so good, like the form and the mechanics. I know he talked to you about mechanical issues that he thought he was going through, maybe rushing through a shot at times throughout the year. But I'm looking at it like, as someone, like, I'm obviously not that level of a basketball experience, but I mean, I played enough basketball to know what a good shot looks like or what good form looks like. And his looks great. I'm like, man, I don't know why he couldn't shoot as good as LaMarcus Aldridge or something like that with a form like that, you know? And so that 30-point game, I allowed myself to kind of let my imagination run wild a little bit of, you know, what that shooting could look like once he figures it out. What do you think it is exactly that's got him here? Is it just the reps? Is it the confidence that they're showing in him? Like what would you attribute sort of the swing to?
I do think a lot of it is reps. And when you look at shooting in the NBA, like a shot is a shot, but but basically the only shot in the NBA that is the same as college is the free throw because it's still 15 feet, you're wide open, whatever. You don't really have to do much to that shot. But the 3-point shot is deeper. It's deeper on all parts of the floor. So you got to make an adjustment there. And the defenders that you're dealing with, they're bigger, and you're not going to have as much space to take that shot. And so I do think that you have to make an adjustment there. I think one of the things that has been, obviously the 3-point shooting has been good and it's been better, but just the fact that he's got that mid-range shot too, that he can go to that and he can get that shot up over anyone. I remember they played Cleveland, I think it was in February. It was like right around the All-Star break, right around that time. And Evan Mobley is guarding him like right at the elbow, and he just takes a mid-range jumper over him and he makes it. And like, that's a shot that nobody can stop, because if Evan Mobley can't get to that, then nobody can get to that. So that stuff is always going to be there, and it's a little bit of a safety valve for the team. Like, hey, when you need a shot, just dump the ball into Jabari, because he's going to get a shot off no matter what. It's just a matter of, can he get the repetitions? Can he continue to make that shot consistently? Or can he, because he hasn't been doing it consistently, but can he get to a point where he's making that shot consistently so that if you do get in a jam with the shot clock, then he's right there for you. And, I know they want to get into the driving kick game. Well, he spreads the floor. He really, he makes that system kind of go. So I do think that there's a reason why a lot of teams had him at the top of their board. He is what you want from a modern big. He can shoot, he can defend. I got some stuff on the defense, which I think is really important for him. So that's why you take him where you take him. And I think that far too often we want just like the instant gratification. We want these guys to be finished products right away. It doesn't work like that. These guys have to improve. They have to get better, and they just have to continue to work at it.
Well, and you mentioned the mid-range game. That's where my imagination was going when I made the LaMarcus Aldridge comparison, because we know when he was at the top of his game, he was just automatic from mid-range. And he could shoot threes, but he was automatic from mid-range. It was just deadly. The Rockets fans should know that just as well as anybody, honestly. But you mentioned having more on the defensive before we move on, because I did want to talk about 3-point shooting, the driving kick game that you just mentioned. I think we're going to hit on some of that with our 3-point conversation. But real quick, you said you had something on the defense. Is there something that you wanted to point out about his numbers there?
I mean, you look at what they've asked of him defensively, and a lot of times he's guarding bigger players, whether it's Giannis or, whoever. They're going to play Jason Tatum tonight. He did a really good job on Jason Tatum back when they played in December. Tatum lit the Rockets up for 38 on 12 of 25 shooting. I think he was 3 of 12 when he was guarded by Jabari Smith. And then on Saturday, the Bulls are kind of a funky offensive team because they play the 4 guards essentially around Nikola Vucevic. Who was the guy that was on DeMar DeRozan for a lot of the night? It was Jabari Smith. And DeRozan had a good game. I think he scored 26 and he shot the ball well. Jabari did a great job on DeRozan. And so he scored 11 points when he was guarded by Jabari, but he was 4 of 12 from the field, and Smith only committed 1 shooting foul against him. And so that's not an easy guy to have to defend. DeRozan has all the tricks in the book. And for the fact that Jabari was able to handle himself defensively, maneuver around all the screens, did not fall into some of the traps, did not foul him and send him to the free throw line a ton, I think that's a really good step in the right direction, because if you want to play, you want to be able to switch defensively. And so, there are going to be times where you got to guard bigs. There are times where you have to be able to defend smaller guys. And the fact that, just this season, he's had really good games against Giannis. He's had a really good game. He had a really good game against Tatum, and he'll get Tatum again tonight. And then he's had a really good game against somebody like DeMar DeRozan. I mean, those are three, pretty different players, and they go about, getting their points in different ways. And with him giving those guys problems, I think that's a really important step, and it shows you just how good, at least on the ball, he can be defensively. Off the ball, he's still got to get better. He's still got to be more attentive. And part of that is just learning NBA offenses. But I do think that was a real positive development on Saturday to see him have some success defending DeMar DeRozan.
I do want to touch on just this team as a whole kind of getting up for the league's best a little bit more. And that's not a foreign concept, something that we've never seen before. A team that's not very good, even a team that is very good, that plays down the competition or up to competition. So we'll talk about that in just a second. But I want to get back to this point about the 3-point shooting stuff, because you mentioned in an article on gallerysports.com how, or at least pointed this out. We know this, but I thought it was interesting you point out how they shot just under 33% from 3-point land over their first 66 games. If I could talk, they shot just under 33% from 3-point distance over their first 66 games. But then they shot pretty well over the weekend. They shot pretty well against the Bulls from 3 until they didn't. Okay. But the thing that I want to get to you about and sort of just pick your brain on is, like, we know that they're not a great 3-point shooting team. And I don't think anything is just going to magically make them one. But Stephen Silas pointed out how most of the threes that they converted on against the Bulls were created by a teammate. It wasn't just dribble three. It was drawing the defender and, driving and kicking, which is, supposed to be, once Jabari Smith figures things out, and as he continues to figure things out, is going to be an area where, like we mentioned earlier, somewhere where he could be really dangerous. But what do you think of, like, with their 3-point shooting? Do you think it's all of just the fact that they are bad at shooting threes, which we know that they are? Or could they be better at shooting threes if they took better threes?
I think it's both. I do think that it would help them if they had better shooters, or the guys that they had taking the high volume of their 3-point attempts were better. I mean, you look at just their high volume 3-point shooters this year. It's Jalen Green taking 7.5 a game, and he's shooting 33.7%. Jabari Smith is taking 5 a game, and he's shooting 30%. Eric Gordon was shooting 34.7% before he got traded on more than 5 attempts a game. KJ Martin has taken a step back in 3-point shooting. He's taking 2.5 a game and shooting less than 32%. So they just don't have a lot of good 3-point shooters, but they haven't been great, or at least you look. So they only took 17 3-pointers in the game against Indiana on Thursday. That's also been a big factor of this, is that they don't create enough of those shots. Now, why did they only create 17 3-pointers against Indiana? Who didn't play in that game? Kevin Porter Jr. So he's the guy, and as their 3-point shooting has really taken a dip, or it really took a dip in the time that Porter was out, because he was the guy who created those shots for them. And so I wrote about this, I guess it was right before he came back. It was in that stretch where he missed the 20 games. Their 3-point shooting was down 20% in terms of their attempts. Their attempts were down 20% in the games that he missed. And it's just that they don't have somebody who can create those drive and kick situations. They have some guys who can drive. Somebody like Josh Christopher can get to the rim. He's not great at finding a teammate. Jalen Green is still trying to get that drive and kick aspect of his game going also. And so there's a ceiling to your offense when you're not taking a lot of threes. Now, the other aspect of this, who was getting most of the touches while Porter was out? It was Alperen Sengun. Now, Sengun is an excellent passer, but for him, he's always looking towards the rim with his passes. It's more cutters than anything else. He's not really looking outside along the arc. And so they try to do this during that stretch. And Stephen Silas said that they were kind of adjusting their spacing to make it to where Sengun would have some passing lanes to the outside, but still, of the assists that he had, I think it was less than 20% were coming on 3-pointers. And so that's one thing that I think that they need to work with Sengun on, is being able, and this is also just on part of the offense too, is put him in a position to where he can find shooters as opposed to cutters. And because I think you can do both. And especially with the way that teams were defending them in that time, where they were really just collapsing on the paint. There are shooters out there. You just have to be able to find them.
Yeah, to me, it's in large part a
And let me
personnel issue.
and I want to sorry just to
No,
add
go
one
ahead,
more
go
thing
ahead.
to that because part of this is also on Shingun because who passes up a lot of looks? It's Shingun,
Yeah,
and
Sengun. Yeah,
Shingun's shooting the ball well. Shingun was shooting. I'm not sure what it is now, but he was right around 50% from three from January 1st on. It's just that he wasn't taking them. He's got the shots. The shots are there. The shot looks pretty good right now. He just got to take them. And that's been another aspect of the Rockets, 3-point shooting is that they're hesitant. And if the shot is there, you've just got to take the shot. If it goes in, great. If it doesn't, keep shooting it. I think that was a big thing that players really appreciated about Mike D'Antoni is just the way that he empowered them and instilled confidence in them. And you'd ask D'Antoni after a game, well, so and so went 0 for 8 from three. Is that something? Would you like to see him take different shots? And D'Antoni's answer would always be, he went 0 for 8. He still got 92 left before I start to care. So just take the shots. You're out there for a reason. It's hard to get open shots in the NBA. If you're somebody who can shoot who can shoot threes, take them when they're open.
yeah. Well, I'm actually glad you interrupted me because I was going to point out the whole issue with Shingun. In terms of not shooting. Vader, a real popular Rockets Twitter person who I follow, tweeted during the Spurs game. Okay, so the one that was in San Antonio, Shingun's hitting the three from the top of the key. And he says, I really do not understand why Alperen Sengun doesn't shoot more threes. The form is good and he has a soft touch. And I quote tweeted him and just said point blank, it seems like I just put confidence. Confidence. It doesn't, I don't know if it's his confidence, the team's confidence. I don't know whose confidence it is, but it doesn't seem like for whatever reason he's willing to be a high volume 3-point shooter, even though his form is good and his percentages aren't that bad. So to me, it's just, yeah. Go ahead.
Well, he's shooting 47% from three since January 1st, but he's only taken 19. Like if you're shooting 47%, you got to be taking more than 19. And he should have that confidence in himself that hey, I can shoot this shot. This is a very makeable shot for me. Just shoot it because if he proves to opponents that he can make that shot, then it completely changes how they defend him. Instead of backing off on him and trying to seal off the paint, now they have to come out and actually defend him. And there's going to be a lot more space for cutters and for other guys within the offense to do some damage. So it's important for him, for not only for him moving forward to take that shot, but just for the offense itself for him to take that shot.
Yeah, I feel like every time the Bulls and the Rockets play, because the Bulls are similar only in the sense that they're not a 3-point shooting team. You mentioned them being a funky offense, but one thing that they don't do particularly well or a lot, and maybe they shouldn't do it a lot if they don't do it well, but to the point, you cannot survive in this league or like be a legitimate team in the NBA and not shoot a lot of threes. That day is gone. You have to shoot a lot. You have to shoot a lot of them, and you have to make a decent number of them. It's mandatory, just flat out. So both of these teams, which is funny that they would have their best, one of their better 3-point shooting performances in a while, like since I think you noted since like early January against the Kings or something like that. It is interesting that two teams that are sort of symbolic of basically playing today's NBA the wrong way and not shooting enough threes and being good enough at threes, that would be the team that they would sort of emerge against. But I want to get into this point about Sengun because, and I just read this headline, I'm gonna be honest here, so I don't even pretend like I've been able to go through all of this. I've read some bits and pieces of it, but this is a headline in the Houston Chronicle from Jonathan Fagan, and I saw you respond to it, or maybe, I don't know if you retweeted it or whatever, but I feel like I saw it off your timeline. But Fagan writes, or the headline on his story says, why Rockets are still struggling to get Alperen Sengun ball at key times. And that looks like it was posted or published yesterday. But I would imagine you would have a good sense for what this is about. Like, what is that about? Why would they be struggling to get Sengun looks when he's one of their more creative and efficient offensive players?
I don't. So I brought this up because of the Boston, because they're playing Boston tonight, and against the Celtics in December, Sengun took 3 shots, and they just couldn't get him the ball, and a lot of that was just Marcus Smart. Marcus Smart being physical, Marcus Smart fronting him, and the Rockets just could not figure out how to get him the ball in that spot. But I do think it's interesting And they played Brooklyn last week, and Sengun just dominated that game early. And I think he had like 12 points or whatever in the first half, made all of his shots, and then he only has 4 points after halftime. And it's kind of been interesting if you look at the splits. Sengun's scoring is going down each quarter, and it's quarter after quarter after quarter. First quarter is his highest, then it goes second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, and he also becomes less efficient after halftime. So I think he was shooting. This was after Tuesday's game. He was over 60% from the field in the first half, and then he was below 50% in the second half. And so the first thing that came to me is, well, is he fading? Is it one of those things where, he's getting tired as the game goes on, just because they're asking him to do a whole lot more this year than they did last year, and he's playing more. We're deep into this season, and the minutes start to pile up. And the one thing I asked Silas about this, and he said it's not Sengun, getting tired or fading. It's just that teams adjust. And so teams all of a sudden really start to focus their defense on Sengun, just because you torch a team in the first half, then all of a sudden in the second half they're gonna adjust. And so that's what teams are doing. And so what the Rockets and what Sengun need to figure out is, okay, what's our next step? What's our next move when teams go to this? There was the game against Minnesota back in, I can't remember when it was, in December or January, where Sengun, again, a really big first half against Rudy Gobert, and then they just packed the paint on. And they said, you know what? We're going to dare you to shoot. And so part of this is a team thing where if the Rockets aren't going to make threes, well, then teams are just going to invite them to shoot. And so that's one aspect of this too, is that it's not, part of this is on Sengun. Part of it is Sengun needs to be more aggressive, but part of this is also on the team getting him the ball. Part of this is on players, making shots too. And so that defenses have to kind of come out of that little shell around the lane.
I want to ask you about why it is that this team gets up. Do you think it's just because of youth that this team gets up for the league's best team, or is that sort of a standard thing for teams to play down and to play up the competition, or is it not a youth exclusive characteristic or trait, or do you think that it is specific to the Rockets youth to the reason why that they're like that?
I don't know if it's specific to the Rockets, but I do think it's human nature. It's like, hey, you see LeBron James on the schedule, you're going to be a little excited to play LeBron James as opposed to playing the Charlotte Hornets when LaMelo Ball isn't playing. I mean, that's just human nature, that you're just going to have more energy going into that game. The crowd's into it a little bit more. So yeah, I do think that part of it has to do with just the human nature of young guys, and you're playing against star players and you want to show off. You want to show that when there are a few more eyes on you, that you are good and that you can play. So yeah, I think it's more that than anything else. And you look at what they've done this season. They've beaten Giannis. They've beaten Philly. They beat James Harden and Joel Embiid. Those games were they played well at home against the good teams. They beat Phoenix at home. So there's more energy in the building for those games. You're excited to play against LeBron, or you're excited to play against James. These guys have relationships with James Harden. We've talked about that ad nauseum. You want to prove something. You feel like you have something to prove when you're playing against some of the league's best. So I do think that's natural, because we've seen it where they'll play really well against a good team, and then they'll play the Spurs and completely lay an egg. And so I just think that's part of youth. I think that's part of human nature. And that's why I think bad teams can steal games against really good teams, because the really good team doesn't care.
Well, and I ask about this more specifically because I feel like we've talked about this before, but when we're looking at the schedule right now, the games that they play, and we mentioned we're recording this on a Monday when they're playing the second of, what is this? Did I say 6 games? Yeah, 6 games. The second of a 6-game homestand. But their next teams, and just take out home out of it, okay? Starting with today, the moment that we're recording this podcast. They got Boston on a Monday night. 2 nights later on Wednesday, they got the Lakers. 2 nights after that on Friday night, they've got the Pelicans in what are looks like back-to-back games against the Pelicans. Then they've got the Warriors. Then they go on the road next Wednesday against Memphis, back-to-back games on the road against Memphis. Then Cleveland. Then then the Knicks in back-to-back nights, Cleveland and the Knicks in back-to-back nights, and then they've got Brooklyn after that. But all of these teams, the majority, if not all of these teams, are either a playoff team, a potential play-in team, or a legitimate title contender. In the case of, Boston, I guess you wouldn't say that anymore about Memphis given their situation, but at one point this year, they did look like that and are that quality of a team. I say all that to say, I feel like since this is a young team that gets up for the league's best, that it's possible that we could see the best of them in these next several games or so. That maybe, and especially since I don't think it's just that, I think that's part of it, but especially since we've heard from Jalen Green and different guys around the team every time we talk to them or get to hear from them, they want to finish this year strong. Like, independent of who they play, they want to finish the year strong. Whether they do it or not is its own separate point. Whether the performance reflects that is its own separate point. But I think they do want it. And if there's anything to be like an added motivation for them to actually go and get it and finish out strong, I'm not talking about just winning games. I'm talking about just playing competent basketball, which I think they've done at times, even in some of these losses over the last several days. That to me is a good sign, because I don't feel like they're good enough to beat most of these teams, but they can play up to the competition and at least feel good about how they finish off the season. To me, it's a good sign that at the final stretch of the season, they're playing teams that they'll be motivated to play well against.
Here's the one issue, though, because what did I just say? When you're a bad team, you can catch the good teams napping a little bit. These teams that you mentioned, for the most part, they have to win these games. And so, the Lakers need wins. The Pelicans need wins. The Warriors need wins. So you're not catching those teams napping. Those teams are going to get up for these games. And so it's going to be.
That's good, though.
Yeah,
that's good. That's good, though, because that way you still accomplish the losing thing, but you get to see them competing against an actual competitive team, not just a good team that's laying over for you or laying down for you so you can just any old run-of-the-mill NBA night. Like the fact that they're catching them down the stretch when it seems like they've got less to play for, but the other teams have a lot to play for in playoff positioning. That is a good prospect for evaluating how competitive they are at the end.
But they actually have to come out with that energy now on all these nights.
Yes.
It's not where some of these games where you can kind of work your way into it, or hey, maybe you don't have the right energy, but the team you're playing doesn't have the right energy, because these teams are going to come out and bring that energy. That's just how it's going to be, because they're playing for their seasons. And so it's an opportunity for the Rockets to be a spoiler in one sense, but they cannot, they cannot play without effort and energy. Otherwise they're going to get embarrassed. So it is important. Like, I think it's good that they're going to be playing and for what some of these teams will be, these will be high leverage games for some of these, for their opponents. But they need to show up. And if they don't show up, then they're just going to get run off the floor and get embarrassed. And then that's not good for anybody moving forward.
All right, Adam, let's jump out of here, man. All of our schedules are a little bit wild today. I will say, though, maybe we should try to do this again this week, maybe Thursday in between the Lakers game and those Pelicans games. That's also something maybe we could talk about offline, but also a possibility for you guys to listen again. Shorter podcast because, again, we got some scheduling things going on, but make sure you subscribe, rate, review, give us 5 stars, and actually, give us a review, because I think that helps with the visibility of the podcast. So we'll see you guys a little bit later on in the week. For Adam Spolane, Austin Mendez, handling things behind the scenes, I am Brandon Scott. This is the H-Town Hoops podcast, and until next time, y'all be good.